Hello, everyone. For those of you that I have not already talked to at this conference, welcome. For those of you who may not know, I started at SAS in 1982, so I am almost as old as the company is. So started straight out of the university, so got all kinds of stories I can share with you. I'm happy to share with you guys the slide deck that I'm going to be presenting here, as well as if anyone would like to come up after the presentation and give me your email, I'll start an email chain to everybody, and we can ask various questions as you, I'll share the slide deck via that way, and we will have it available to ask questions. I do work at customer escalations. Things I've done throughout my career at SAS is I've helped customers understand the hardware needs that they need to run their SAS 9 on. Here recently in SAS R&D, I have been managing our host systems. That's the group of folks in development that help take we talked about in the opening session, the MVA code. There's a layer called host systems code that allows that MVA to talk to the operating systems. I manage that group of folks for SAS 9, as well as overseeing the group of folks that manage our SAS access engines. As a reminder, SAS 9 has been around for a very long time. You'll see here on June of 2025, good gosh, 2025 that we released the M9 version of SAS. In March of 2027, we have slated to release the upcoming M10 version of SAS. And for those of you who may not have attended Joe Hatcher's presentation earlier today, he talked about what the highlights are going to be for M10. So I'm basically taking his presentation and concentrating on SAS Access. There are close to 32, is that correct, Mickey, unique access products in the SAS 9 family? Here, a bunch of them are right here on the screen. Some of them are wildly popular. Some of them have been here for a long time, like OLEDB, and we still have it because people are still using it. But what you'll see in blue underneath here are some of the highlights that were added to that access product in the M9 timeframe. One of the biggest ones, Google BigQuery, we've made some significant performance enhancements to what was in the M8, so that's available for you there. SAS access to JDBC, we've added batch update. That parameter replaces the bulk load that's available. We've done some enhancements with Microsoft SQL Server with bulk load to make it run faster. For the most part, the other ones are there continuing to work. We will be revisiting and making sure that we're supporting later versions of each of those databases as they come out. From a other point of view, we're looking at, like I said, we're looking at supporting version 66 for Salesforce. Spark, we've put a bunch of enhancements to the M9 in there. Teradata, we're in the process of verifying Teradata on 1720. And then, actually, it was verified on 1720. We're in the process of verifying Teradata 20. That'll be later on this year. For those of you that may be on the mainframe, they took the access to Teradata away in the M8 timeframe. We put it back in the M9, so it is currently back available for you in M9. Fast export, fast load, multi-load, they're replacing the deprecated TPT functions that Teradata had. This is by working directly with Teradata that those are there. And we're in the process of adding single sign-on support to Teradata. That's something that's been asked for quite some time. So those are the big highlights there for those products. Did anyone see anything up there that they didn't have questions about or anything? We're right now in the process of looking at doing some additional things in the SAS access timeframe, one of which we're looking at adding SSL vulnerability for all the data direct drivers. They update those quite often. We're in the process of getting that updated and added to SAS 9. And then the next bullet here is, I've had a lot of discussion about this on the demo room floor or the hub this week, about support for other data sources, in particular DuckDB. Anyone interested in DuckDB? Bart's interested in everything. So yes, so DuckDB is something that we've looked into. We are holding out on the DuckDB because it's still a new product. It comes out with new updates often. I heard it maybe as often as every 2 weeks or at least once a month. That is too often for us to get updates to SAS 9. It's great for VIA where it's at, where they come out with monthly versions, but it's a little hard for us to get that out in the SAS 9 timeframe. But how many of you want DuckDB because of Parquet, being able to access Parquet? So Parquet's much stabler, is that a word? More stable. It's been a long day. I'm running out of words. So we're going to look at maybe coming out with a SAS access to Parquet, and then eventually DuckDB as it becomes more mature there. And I know she said to hold questions until the end, but right now, does anyone else have any other data sources you would like for us to put on the list?
Is Synapse covered under the Microsoft SQL Server?
Yep.
What's Databricks in there?
Databricks is in there, yes. Spark is, Databricks is under the Spark. Hang on. Databricks, bulk load, and things like that is part of the access to Spark there. One of the big features in the M9 timeframe is VIA had done a lot of enhancements to the access engines. We pulled all of their enhancements back in M9, and they now ship in M9. And we are staying very close together to make sure anything we add to SAS 9 gets added to VIA and vice versa. So I meet with them on a weekly basis about what's new and what we can do to do that. Yes?
Is that FedSQL the same as FedSQL that's in VIA for the proc FedSQL?
Yes.
So if you did stuff on M9, you're going to VIA, you could test it and use the same code? Okay.
Yes. We have, yes, all of that's there.
One more question.
Yes?
Because you mentioned that SSO support for SOS2 Teradata is now included, but that has been around for quite a few years, hasn't it?
The SSO for Teradata? No. This is where we're trying to remove the single sign-on so that you no longer have to pass your username and password on the live name statement. So this is a new feature there. This is going to be a short presentation, by the way. The other thing that I wanted to do a lot of talking about is, how does SAS Access work? We get this question a lot. So you have over here on the left-hand side of the screen the SAS Access engine. And what you're going to see there is a database connection module that is part of SAS. That connection module talks to the vendor client piece. And then that vendor client piece goes out and talks to the database wherever it is. So I'm going to put on my DB2 hat because that's the one I know the most about. That vendor client piece is DB2 Connect. So the most important thing for you to gather from this is SAS talks to the client piece. And then it's the client piece that talks to the backend server. So we get lots of questions with regard to, does SAS support DB2 45, the new version that's just been announced? The answer is we support the client here, 44 or 40, whatever it is, and if 40 talks to 45, then it's supported. We don't have to do anything from a SAS Access Engine point of view to support the latest version of the database if that client piece works. So that's the biggest thing to understand. And generally with the client pieces, they go to a version earlier, the current version, and then a version in the future. So they're the one that does the most things there. So that's just the biggest thing to understand. The other thing is if you're having issues with accessing data in the database itself, you can use tools that just talk from the client to the database to make sure your interconnect and everything within your organization is working okay. Sometimes it's not a SaaS issue. Sometimes it's the connectivity between the client face and the back-end server that's the problem. So this is just some things to talk about with you about how to go about looking at it. And then the next thing I wanted to talk about was, again, performance issues. We get, again, my group does a lot with performance. We get a lot of questions about, hey, this isn't performing as well as it should have, but various things along the lines of that. So the questions to think about are the location of SaaS and where the database is. If we go back to that list of databases, a lot of those databases are in the cloud. So if you're running SaaS on-premise and you're accessing your data in the cloud, that's a big WAN. That's a long distance from point A to point B. So we need to look into that as to whether or not that's part of the performance considerations. We did do enhancements to Google BigQuery, but a lot of the customer issues we're running into now is getting their data in and out of Google. Google has teeny tiny pipes going into their public cloud by default, and you need to look into that as possible, what's taking the most amount of time, which gets to the next point there, which is network bandwidth. Is the bandwidth able to support what you're trying to do? It might be good in your testing because you're only testing 2 jobs, but if on the day you go production, now all of a sudden 100 folks try to all pull data from Google BigQuery, the network bandwidth may not be enough there. So those are some things to think about when you have your data and SaaS in over a WAN to be able to access the information. Been working with a customer that moved, for those of you who were in my SaaS cloud presentation this morning, I'm going to pick on this customer again. It's still ingrained in my head, all the pain we dealt with that one. They moved SaaS to the cloud, again, off of on-prem into the cloud. But they left their 5 distinct databases on-prem. And so they're now wondering why, well, this job ran in 10 minutes before. So I got them to send me the log. And in the log, it was only 4 steps. One was an initialization step. One was a proc SQL, pulling data out of the database. And the other 2 were a couple little simple reports. Again, it ran in 10 minutes on-prem. In the cloud, it was an hour and a half, of which an hour and 20 minutes were spent with that proc SQL step. So what we did is we put the very last command that's in italics at the bottom. That's a SAS option that does a SAS trace. The D gives you details, the S gives you summary, and the A gives you analytics. So if you just do the summary, it'll tell you of the hour and 28 minutes, in this case, an hour, 27 and a half minutes were spent fetching. If I give the details, it'll tell me how big each fetch was. And in their case, they were fetching several 100 million rows, 100 rows at a time. So there were a gazillion fetch statements in there. So that put us back up to talking to them about, there are some options called bulk unload and bulk load to be able to do, or in some of these cases, you can set the size of that from 100 rows to say maybe 100,000 rows in a fetch. Fewer IOs mean faster time. So we had to do some things there. But these are just some ways if you're working with your users and they're using Access SQL going over to a live name, over to an Access engine, that you are able to do it. This then leads into only transferring the data you need to, for those of you that have been programmers for forever. If you don't need all 100 million rows, you only need the rows for the state of Texas, not all the United States, and you only need 10 of the 100 columns. Only pull back what you need, and just put that in your SQL. If at all possible, perform the task in the database. If the first thing you're going to do when you pull the data into SAS is sort it, group by it, sort it in the database before pulling it over. Let them handle it. They're very good at it. And then optimizing your SQL usage to make sure what you're doing is as optimal as possible. So that's one of the things that the guys, SAS Access folks in technical support are constantly helping people rewrite their SQL statement to be more optimized and doing it properly. So those are just some things from performance considerations to be able to look at, to be able to understand what's going on, to be able to help things, make things better. Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that I'm noticing when I'm connecting to cloud data is slowness due to the size of the field, because in Snowflake it's like an open variable that doesn't really have an end length, but then you pull it into SAS and it puts it to like the max number.
Yep.
So then the data gets blown up.
Okay, and that's true. SAS does not know, by talking to Snowflake, you know, if it's a variable length varchar, is that what it's called? Yeah. And then it's going to basically sit here and say, well, the maximum it can be is this, so therefore, to be safe, we're going to do this. You can always truncate that field. You can always, in the SQL, say that I want this field to be only this big, not that big. That's what I'm saying about making sure your SQL statements are good as you're pulling it across. If you leave it up to SAS, we're going to err on, we don't want to truncate anything, we don't want to get in trouble for doing that. But if you want to do that by adding those functions in the SQL code, you can. So.
The biggest sin of SQL programmers is that select asterisk from.
Absolutely. When we first started, I'm going to put on my way back hat. When we first came out with EG, years and years ago, one of our first customers were American Airlines, and they used EG to generate a query to their reservation data file, select star. It crashed their entire data center trying to pull all that data back to SAS. So there was one of these, is there any way you guys can put some governance in SQL so that my users don't do stupid things? And we went, no, but yeah, the SQL, you know, again, it's the easiest thing to do. I don't know what I don't know. I'm just going to pull it all back. But again, there's a cost to that, so. My next slide is going to talk about some resources that are here to be able to look at. There's detailed about what's in every single one of those, Access products via the what's new and the links here to go into things. There's a help center for database-specific references, performance considerations, a whole bunch of things along the lines of that. The next slide is open for questions. Now we're in the hub. Well, I think the hub is closing soon. So I'm here to help you with any questions you have there, but just basically wanted to be able to explain SAS Access to you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Margaret. One thing that I'm seeing a lot of customers requesting is Snowflake, because, you know, the MFA they have sort of
Yes.
coming out and such. I know that there are certain technical papers exist by SAS about Shibboleth and, you know, utilizing those. But is there something apart from the key pair setup?
Right.
That is something that will be a huge win. Is there any program on, and you know?
We're in the process, so there are 2 JIRA tickets open within SAS development to support single sign-on and those types of things, MFA and things like that. All right, let me back it up. We're aware that Snowflake and Salesforce both want us to use OAuth to be able to connect to them. Those are in the works. I don't know when they'll be available, but they're in the works. There is a workaround for one of those that was at the key pair you were just, yeah. But we are going to support it officially, but right now there's a workaround for one. The other one has the higher priority to get out the door. I think, so one of the things that's interesting with that one is if we code it to use OAuth, the old way of connecting to that database will no longer work. So we're making sure that everyone's aware of that. It's not going to be an either or. It's going to be, okay, we've gone from here to here, and we understand it. It'll probably go out as a hot fix. It'll be up to you to apply the hot fix or not. But starting with M10, it'll be in there. That's how it'll work with M10. The next thing, for those of you who may not have attended the M10 presentation, one of the biggest features to go with M10 is MFA, and we will be honoring that with SaaS Access as well. So multi-factor authentication will be going through all the Access products there. We're still trying to figure out what that means, but we're going to honor it, so we're in the process of doing that, so.
Any more questions?
So going back to the Synapse database situation, I was trying to use an Access tool that I already had in-house, so I managed to connect with ODBC. Would there be any benefit to purchasing a Microsoft SQL one, or is it
The
just
SQL Server
performance?
one
Yeah.
is also ODBC under the covers. It's the same.
Oh, okay, so
Same, yep.
there's no performance tricks in there. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions for Margaret?
What about connection to SharePoint list? Is there any way to?
SharePoint list. Mickey, do you know how to connect to SharePoint? I thought there was a way to do that, but I don't remember. It's not via an Access engine.
Chris Hamdinger had a build on SaaS communities, the whole step-by-step.
Yep.
Good,
Do you know which channel on SaaS Communities it was? Is it the programmer one or?
Okay, thank you.
Google it, it should come up. Yeah. Been doing that for a few years, but it's pretty slick.
So what I will do is, for those of you who want to give me your email, I'll do some research, find out what that is, post that to it along with the slide deck, and then you guys can ask questions back and forth. I cannot speak enough about the SaaS communities. If you guys are not members of those, please join. I post things all the time from an operating system point of view in the admin channel. There's a programming channel. There's a lot of ways to go about it. Rob, do you guys post there? Yeah, Rob is part of the Global GEL. What does GEL stand for? Global Enablement and Learning, and they're constantly writing papers and putting blogs up. They're wonderful, wonderful papers that help you understand things. So they love to have the hard questions, and they love to come up with the answers.
Yeah, I have a question. So we have a full, all our footprints in the GCP. So our VMs, the BigQuery is in GCP, and our SaaS 9.4 is in GCP. But we found out that we're initially using the on-prem SQL using the SaaS Access license, and that was better performant than the actual BQ connection within the GCP. So we've been trying to work with SaaS and our SaaS reseller why there's a performance difference, because you would think that if it sits in BQ, BQ sits in GCP, that would be faster than the same job when connecting to the on-prem SQL environment. So
Not necessarily. Yes, you are still in Google. Yes, it is still a cloud. You have no idea what the network bandwidth is from the Google that you're running and the Google SaaS. I can guarantee you it's teeny tiny pipes going from point A to point B. How many hops are you going through? Things along the lines of that. You need to work with Google to find out why that's happening. I'm sure that you've got a much bigger pipe from on-prem into Google than you do from Google to Google.
okay, all right.
I'm not a big fan of Google, if you can't tell.
Lucky us.
Again, there are ways within Google that you can get faster pipes. It just costs more money. And I've looked into that before. We were working with a customer that moved their SaaS into Google, and they like you said, it worked fine for 4 or 5 users, and then they opened it up to 800, and it fell over, and we determined that their pipe going in was only 750 megabytes per second, and they needed to support 2,000 users concurrently. Not big enough. So I pointed them to, I think I Googled the a bigger pipe into GCP, and they go, oh, for this additional fee, you can have this. So, but that to me is a Google question. Call Google and ask them that very question. Why can I get faster performance from on-prem than I can from within your cloud? So.
I mean, you're right about the cost. They said, well, you know, if you want us to look into that, we have additional stuff that we can help you with.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know who came up with the going to the cloud is going to be cheaper. I don't know who came up with that. I'm sorry, I should not have said that when he had a mouthful of drink back there. But it's not. So you take a big chug, I make that comment, and I thought he was going to spray his friends with it. So, but yes, no, you get what you pay for. A lot of people want to go with the cheap, and then they're unhappy with performance. And to get the performance better, they're going to have to. My analogy in the cloud paper earlier is I like to drive Lamborghinis, therefore I set you up with a Lamborghini. I like to go fast, so but it costs money. So.
The other thing that noticed that some customers is that they went to the cloud, right? They went to the cloud, but then their database, that's why I tried
Yep.
to when you mentioned it. And then, when you get data out of the cloud, it starts the meter.
Right, so generally going into the cloud will allow you to push all the data you want to into the cloud because you're paying them for the storage it's going to land on. But as soon, and one of the years ago when I did the presentation first about the cloud, I think it was one of the principal financial goes, but do you understand when I pull my data back out, it starts costing a lot of money. And so, and more money as you pull the data out. So, they get you put your data up there, they convince your IT department, oh, we're going to save you money, put your data up there, and then they get you on the other end when your applications that are still on premise need to access that data. So make sure you dot all the I's, cross all the T's before you do it. Having it be 2 locations, some in the cloud, some not, generally starts, they start nickel and diming you around there. Mickey, is there anything I forgot?
No, I don't think so.
Mickey is our product manager for the SaaS Access, the data management tools within SaaS. And Rob is, like I said, the jail guru. Is there anything I forgot? Anything you want to add?
I think you covered it.
Cool. I'm standing between you and beer. Let me let you go. So come write down your email addresses if you would like for me to send you things.